Today is a very special day. So, it doesn't matter what age you are. You could be age 5 or 55. You know this car when you see it. It's the iconic Batmobile. And nobody knows more about the Batmobile than the guest we have today, Mr. Joe Johnson. So, Joe, thank you for coming out today.
Thanks for having me. You know, we all know and love the Batmobile. The amazing thing about the Batmobile is that it's changed form over the years, but each version of it is still recognized as the Batmobile. Most people remember the Batmobile from the TV series. A lot of people love the Batmobile from the Michael Keaton movie, and it's changed multiple times over the years. It became the Tumbler in the Batman Begins Dark Knight series. So everyone has their favorite version of the Batmobile, but it goes all the way back to comics, late 30s, when Batman was in the pages of comic books. A few years into the run, they decided he needed a ride. And the ride that premiered in the page of the comic books wasn't quite what you would expect. You'll see that it's a pretty mundane, average car for the time. I mean, today it would be considered a beautiful classic car, but back then it wasn't very special. It was just one of Bruce Wayne's fleet of cars, and Batman had access, of course, to take one of them out. So that was the first car, the first Batmobile that Batman drove, and I have a little kind of a model of it here. There's a company called Eagle Moss that did a line of Batmobile die-cast cars. They called it Automobilia, and they released, probably about 100 different versions of the Batmobile from the comics, from TV, and from the movies. And not just the Batmobile, but all of his other rides too. Bat cycles, Bat copters, Bat boats.
Bat copters.
Yeah, they did all that stuff. So they actually went as far as to do a little die-cast toy version of Batman's first Batmobile.
Wow.
So not all that exciting. Most people wouldn't recognize that as the Batmobile. But then later they realized, okay, we need to give it a little flair, a little style. So that's when they decided to give it some Bat features. They got the Bat fin on the back, they got the Bat face on the front, and they got a supercomputer in the trunk. And that's when they decided Batman had to have a cool ride with Bat features. So that is sort of the origin of the Batmobile with Bat-like features. And then the comic book creators just started going nuts after that. So then, a couple of decades after Batman had premiered in the comics, they did his first TV show, 1966. The year I was born, maybe that's why I have a connection to it. We were both born the same year. But a guy named George Barris was contacted by the production company, and they said, we need a Batmobile. And he said, well, how long do I have? And they said, about 3 weeks. And
3 weeks?
I have to build a Batmobile in 3 weeks. Well, as luck would have it, he had a car on his lot. Here's a little example of the car that sat on his lot. It started out in white. It was a concept car that traveled the auto show circuit. It was called the Lincoln Futura. It was built in 1955. And once it got done traveling the auto show circuit, it was used in a movie called It Started With a Kiss, starring Debbie Reynolds and Glenn Ford. And they painted it red. So after it did the movie, George Barris, this custom car designer in Hollywood, got his hands on the car, and it sat on the lot, rusting in the elements for a number of years. So flash forward to when they needed a Batmobile for the Batman TV show. He just happened to have this car sitting on his lot, and he says, okay, I got this. So he took the car, brought it into his shop, painted it black, opened up the wheel wells, did some pinstriping on it, and turned that into the beloved Batmobile that we all know and love. And so there was only one car built for the TV series. People say, oh, no, I've seen the Batmobile here in Detroit. Those are all replicas. Those are not the original Batmobile.
Truly only one Batmobile.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, here's a picture on my Facebook page here of me posing with the one true Batmobile.
And this is in L.A.?
This was in North Hollywood. That's George Barris's shop there. I got to visit in 2011, got to see the car up close.
Is that you leaning on the car?
That's me with my hand on the car. It was a dream come true to
Now that's really
see
special,
that.
right? Because you're putting your hand on. How expensive is that equipment?
Well, it was priceless up until a few years ago, and for reasons I'll never understand, George Barris decided he was going to auction the Batmobile off, and it was something he said he would never do. But he was getting up there in years, and as a matter of fact, he passed away just about 2 years ago. But he decided he was going to auction off the Batmobile, so it went across the auction block at Barrett-Jackson in Arizona, and the final hammer price on the car was $4.2 or so million. Wow. It turns out two bidders got into a kind of a war and were going back and forth, so they finally settled it with a coin toss. Wow. And they said whoever wins the coin toss gets the car at $4.2 million. So they flipped a coin. Guy won it and went home with the original Batmobile.
So the Batmobile is a true test of not giving up in your dreams, because this car sat lonely and rusting.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it became a $4 million car.
Exactly. So now the weird thing is when the Batman TV show was on the air, there was really not a lot of marketing and merchandise that went with it. That was kind of a new thing back then. It wasn't until 2007, believe it or not, Hot Wheels, Mattel is the company that makes Hot Wheels, they got the license to produce Batman merchandise from the original TV show. Wow. It's kind of mind-boggling to think it took almost 40 years to get the rights to do it. Mm-hmm. So what you see here is the very first Hot Wheels car based on the original Batmobile.
Is the very first one sold?
Not necessarily the first one sold, but you can see that it says on here, well, this says new models. I think there's another one that says first edition. But the very first one that appeared on eBay when they announced that these were going to get released sold for well over $100 on eBay for a car that sells in stores for 99 cents.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, because someone had to have the first one. Since then, they became fairly common to find in stores, and eventually this became Hot Wheels' all-time biggest seller. I don't know what the numbers are on it, but George Barris, who created the car, he says that it was Hot Wheels' #1 biggest seller of all time. Wow. So since then, after releasing it in that scale, they've released it in a wide variety of other scales. There's the 1/18th scale car, which is sitting on the top shelf there. That's kind of a larger version. And then you can see that Eagle Moss included this in their line of die-cast cars. So really, when the rights were freed up and people were able to get the rights to produce merchandise, people went nuts, and you were able to find the Batmobile in just a wide variety of scales. And they eventually released a large version that you could use with action figures, and they made the first ever figures based on Adam West and Burt Ward, who were the original Batman and Robin. So all heck broke loose in 2007 and beyond when they started merchandising a show that was 40 years old, if you can believe it.
So this is from the 60s, and all of a sudden in 2007, they start releasing merchandise.
When they started producing
and there's still enough fans for people to get it. I mean,
oh yeah, and what's amazing to me, even though Toys R Us has since closed up shop, but just a few years ago, you'd be able to walk into Toys R Us and see the original Batman and Robin on their toy shelves. That was mind-boggling to me that people were still interested in a 40-year-old show.
Wow. Well, thank you for coming out, Joe. This is I learned a lot about the Batmobile. We do have to wrap things up. Well, thank you guys for having us. Make sure you guys tune in next week when you see the Batmobile live and in person with Joe Johnson.